Consciousness is the most familiar thing there is, yet the most mysterious and intractable thing there is, too. That's by David Chalmers. That's our quote of the day, and this is Exus The Podquest.
This show is for seekers. We are seeking answers to the fundamental questions of existence. Questions such as, how did the universe get started? What's the meaning of life? Why is there something rather than nothing? And most importantly, how can we fix the dying problem?
All right, welcome to Exus The Podquest. We are going to be seeking answers today to a bunch of questions, a lot of cool things. Most importantly, the hard question of consciousness, and digging also into Microvita and a whole bunch of really neat things. We have a special guest with us today. As always, a fantastic guest. His name is Richard Gauthier. He is a former physics instructor, and he's also an independent researcher who focuses on the areas of consciousness and things related to that, and with an emphasis on the work of a yoga master or yoga philosopher named P.R. Sarkar. I had not heard of P.R. Sarkar before running across Richard Gauthier's work, but now I've certainly dug in, and I can't wait to talk to Richard about this. It's just going to be fantastic. If you want to know more about Richard Gauthier's work and his relation to P.R. Sarkar, go to his website. It is Richard Gauthier. I'll spell that for you. Richard, and then gauthier.academia.edu/research. So we're really excited to deal with this. We'll just jump right into it. Welcome to Exus The Podquest, Richard Gauthier.
Hello, Brian.
Hey, Richard, how are you?
I'm great.
Good. All right, we're going to be covering a lot of territory, a lot of ground, and I'd like to start out like I'm kind of liking to do these days. I want to start out with like a big overview question, and then come back and hit a lot of the details. So let me start with this. In terms of P.R. Sarkar, we're going to talk a lot about him. Does his philosophy, did he find the answers to life, the universe, and everything?
Finding means discovering something he didn't know. Many people who know him quite closely, as much as they can, it's not that he found that he intuited in his own imagination, which many people think is a kind of a cosmic imagination. So he just describes what he sees in his cosmic imagination about consciousness, the universe, life, and mind, and how it all works.
Well, fantastic. Well, give us a little bit of an unpacking a little bit of his bio. Give me some details about him, P.R. Sarkar, and his life and his kind of, his thinking.
Okay. He was born in India in 1921 in a small Indian village. Actually, not so small. It was a town of Jamalpur, a small town in India. He grew up a very unusual boy, kept to himself a lot, but like he wandered in the hills around Jamalpur, and someone saw him riding a tiger one day. His little friends, and they said, "We're going to tell your mother and dad." And he said, "They'll never believe you. Don't do that." And sure enough, they told his parents, and the parents didn't believe him. But he actually did ride a tiger at about 5 years old, and he had a lot of other unusual qualities in that way. He could write his name in 7 languages when he was 7 years old. When his sister told him that he was just idling his time away, he showed that he could very well show his intellectual qualities. No. And so he was a very unusual boy. He went to an ordinary college in Calcutta for 2 years, but his father died, and he was the older son, so he had to come back to his town and get a job. So he worked as an accountant in the British Railway Office for about 20 years, but he was secretly a guru. People one by one came in contact with him, and they realized that he's a spiritual master, and he taught them meditation and spiritual philosophy. And after a period of years, he brought them all together in one room and said, "Now this is who we are, and this is the spiritual organization, Ananda Marga, And now it's in Jamalpur, but in the future it's going to be international and worldwide. And people couldn't believe it, of course, because it was just a small town in India. But it turned out that about 20 years later, his mission, organization, Ananda Marga, was all over the world with monks and nuns and many teachers and many schools and projects developed around the world. Because it's not only a spiritual mission that he started, but it's a social service mission as well. And its goal is to help create a universal society based on rationality and no dogmatism, but based in spirituality and consciousness being the priority in both the existence of the universe and the evolution of the universe.
Wow, how fascinating! This guy is he the person pictured right behind you?
Yes,
Huh?
P.R. Sarkar, Prabhat Ranjan Sarkar, or his spiritual name Sri Sri Anandamurti.
Okay, great. The Tiger Rider. How cool is that?
Yes,
Um, and you mentioned Ananda Marga. How do you spell that? Just if you wouldn't mind, just for the audience, spell that out for us so everyone can go take a look.
Ananda, Ananda, means spiritual bliss or infinite bliss. Marga means path. So the path of bliss is the movement that he started based on his spiritual and social philosophy of universalism and rational spirituality.
Okay. Yeah, as I started getting prepared for and working on the outline, the whole thing for today's interview, it struck me that he's a person. He was a person of a lot of diverse interests, but he really focused on, and for today's purposes, certainly focused on cosmology. And how the universe began. I always think of cosmetology, but of course it's not. He's not doing hair and nails. It's more universe stuff, right?
Yeah,
Cosmology. I got that right.
yeah,
All right. And then also, how did life begin? And then how did it evolve? And you've got a whole bunch of stuff working in there. I'd like to
yeah,
kind of work our way through that in terms of his cosmology, the big stuff. How did the universe get here? What did he say about that?
yeah. He started out. He put everything in a short book that he wrote called, or he actually dictated the book,
Hmm.
Ananda Sutram, which literally means bliss sutras, short summary statements, which he then elaborated. The first, it's 5 chapters, about I think 87 sutras, and he just starts out saying that consciousness is the creator of the universe. The first sentence in his book says Shiva, which is consciousness, and Shakti, which is the creative power of consciousness, together constitute the supreme entity, Shiva and Shakti. So it's a singular entity, and it starts out where the singular entity is completely in a balanced state. There's no expression at all. That's called nirguna, non-expressed Brahma or consciousness. But a part of that Shakti, qualifies the nirguna and creates a you can say a universe creating divinity, which then goes ahead and creates a cosmic mind within itself. And so the cosmic mind then evolves the universe within its cosmic mind, and within the universe that's an ever-changing process. So evolution goes on in the cosmic mind in the form of the universe evolving through matter, then origin of life and simple life, then plants, animals, human beings, and he calls it the cosmic cycle of creation, starting at infinite supreme consciousness, kind of circling around through matter, mind, back to consciousness, and the final goal of individual human lives is to become one with that infinite supreme consciousness again. So closing the cycle for spiritual evolution, one human being at a time.
Okay. And okay, starting with the infinite supreme consciousness, what is that? Is that just a consciousness itself that doesn't have like a structure or a body, but it's just consciousness itself?
It's pure consciousness. There's no structure. There's no qualities at all. In fact, qualities are what its creative power gives to itself to make itself express qualities like mind or universe. So it starts out with a non-qualified, which means it doesn't have a body. Bodies are created by its own consciousness when it gives itself qualities. So infinite, pure, non-qualified consciousness is like the beginning state. When it gives some qualities to itself by its creative power of Shakti, then it creates you can say a qualified supreme consciousness, which is the creator of the universe. And that goes on to, it creates a mind. Before there was no mind, so it creates the cosmic, the qualified supreme consciousness creates a mind, and that mind has stages like I exist, I do, and I have done. And in the I have done portion of its mind, he creates the universe itself as a thought process within his, you could say, his cosmic mind. And that the universe is evolving as a thought process down through, it starts with a big bang, basically, but it goes down through space. As space gets more and more concentrated, and explosions occur from time to time, but finally it gets down to planets and the origin of life. And then the cycle from consciousness to matter sort of takes a curve and goes from matter to consciousness, back up through the evolution of life.
Okay. So if you go back to the very beginning, then infinite consciousness exists. How did Sarkar why did he even think that was the case? I mean, why would he think that there was this infinite supreme consciousness as opposed to something else?
I can only say that was his experience.
Okay.
And he's expressing his knowledge, his experience
Okay.
Of that.
With that experience, like
in a philosophical way.
Okay. Is it his experience gained maybe through meditation, perhaps?
He was born, you can say, in a very highly evolved state. When he was born, he recognized his parents and his family. He knew who they were. They tried to give him a little bit of milk on a piece of cotton, and he picked up the cup and started drinking it, with his hands. And then he said, "Oh, I realized that I'm not acting like a baby. I should start acting like a baby again." And then he just sort of started acting like a baby again. But he was born with full expression of consciousness, and he just expressed it more and more as he grew up.
Yeah,
So
I asked because when we interviewed our friend Swami from the Hindu community, he had explained that the origin of how basically the question is, how do you know that there's a supreme consciousness of some sort? And he explained that there were a large number of people they referred to as rishis who had all meditated, and they all had really came to had the same experience, and that therefore they concluded that this supreme ultimate reality is what it is. But I always want to dig further to say, like, well, couldn't that be just them? Or maybe in this case, P.R. Sarkar, just their own version of it. Like, this is what the human mind is able to achieve, like, or to experience when it's meditating, but it doesn't necessarily reflect the ultimate reality. Like in this case, supreme consciousness.
Well, those rishis were all human beings that dedicated their lives to exploring their selves and their higher selves, and their realizations basically included the attainment of the realization of infinite consciousness, which they called the great, or in Brahma. But those are human beings attaining that consciousness. But there's also kind of another level that consciousness itself is existing prior to all those rishis and prior to the universe. And you can say its desire, because it has desires when it expresses itself, is to generate an infinite number of human souls, which each embody themselves in the evolutionary process, and each go on to become highly developed human beings, which then can meditate and realize their true nature. So the infinite consciousness itself is higher than those rishis. The rishis realized that infinite consciousness through their intense meditation efforts.
Hmm. Okay. See, yeah, and that's kind of what I'm getting at. And when I'm thinking about all these issues, certainly on the PodQuest itself in general, and all the research I do, I always look to say, okay, yeah, you've got in this case the rishis and PR Sarkar, etc., and they're all experiencing something, and they're describing what they're experiencing. But if it were, let's say, an experiment, like you can test it, you can somehow objectively see it. Like let's switch to even different religions. If you've got the Jewish religion and Christian religion, Yahweh would be the God there. Here, supreme consciousness, but they're Yahweh. And you're asking, well, how do you know it even exists? So that's what I'm basically getting at. And there, in that religion, well, God would have told people, some certain people. And here, the rishis are experiencing it individually, but it's not generally given to everybody, unless you somehow, I don't know, go down the same path, perhaps. And that's where I have that's where I struggle with it a little bit.
Well, human beings by their nature, are never satisfied with what's limited. Their internal nature, as their, you could say, design, is to not accept limitedness. And so they keep trying and trying to find out, go beyond that. The rishis were people who went beyond that as much as they could, but the supreme consciousness itself expresses itself through, you can say, a guru that is not a human being. The human being is an expression of the consciousness of that, the guru, which is the supreme consciousness. So through manifesting in a human form from time to time, or even through indirectly, just through intuitional, you can say, contact, that's, you can say, supreme guru teaches individuals how to meditate.
Right.
And then they follow those practices, and the internally the guru gives them guidelines to do that, not only how to do meditation, but how to practice goodness and good qualities in their life, which really helps meditation to develop. So meditation requires a strong moral character to develop as well. The minimum characteristic or necessity for doing meditation, according to Sarkar, is a human body. And an ancient teacher, Shiva, said that first, where his wife asked him in a series of dialogues, what's the minimum requirement to learn meditation? And he said, you have to have a human body to learn meditation. Mm-hmm. But once you have a human body, you can then start doing practices that correspond to your state of mental development. Because when human beings are first born, their qualities are more like animal qualities. They're eating, sleeping, reproducing, fighting, and they gradually develop subtler qualities, you can say, when they reach a human stage. And they can develop even more subtler stages when they're kind of almost divine in nature. So human beings have they're going through a evolutionary process in their own spiritual development, and each stage they have certain spiritual practices that they can practice to advance themselves. So that whole subject is called intuitional science, and it can start out with just on a very simple level to say, if I'm eating meat, I should think that meat is actually an expression of God. And so they're eating meat, but they're associating it with something subtle. And later on, they decide, well, maybe I shouldn't eat meat after all. And their minds become more subtle if they don't eat meat generally. And they continue like that. The practices that they get correspond to their level of spiritual development or human development.
Well, it's absolutely fascinating, and yet I come back and I always think, when I'm looking at, like, the bigger issues, which of course is really what the whole show's about, but the biggest issues of, like, okay, is there this supreme consciousness? Is there like a creative force and all the rest of it? What kind of jumps at me is that, well, yeah, we have intermediaries. We have like the yogis or the prophets, etc., that can then give the information to everybody else. But if you're the supreme consciousness, or if you're the the God, so to speak, why wouldn't you
Yes,
just give it out? Why wouldn't you just tell everybody, the same thing? Hey, okay, I'm here, and not make everybody go through an intermediary person.
because they wouldn't believe it, I guess, first of all.
Well, I mean, but
And
wouldn't they
and
less believe
also you
somebody
can say,
a human?
why does the universe exist in the first place? According to the supreme consciousness, it's because the supreme consciousness was lonely and it wanted some, some, you could say, companionship in the form of human beings that could interact with him, and he could help them develop. So but you can say, as my understanding, there is the supreme consciousness, but it can also, from time to time, historically, appear in human form, retaining its full supreme consciousness. So that's not the same as a rishi, who's a human being who's doing meditation and trying to reach the supreme consciousness. And so P.R. Sarkar said that Shiva was such an entity, an actual human being who lived about 7,000 years ago, that's now considered a mythological figure. But P.R. Sarkar said that he was a real human expression, and he had full supreme consciousness, which he applied to the society of his day, which was basically to introduce marriage, to introduce music and dance and different things like that to help the human society evolve. And he introduced spiritual practices 7,000 years ago, which was the system of yoga that's still practiced today, which is called Astanga Yoga, 7 limbs of spiritual practice, starting with following moral principles, doing yoga exercises, certain kind of breathing exercises and concentration exercises, leading up to the last state, which is called samadhi. And samadhi is the state of spiritual realization that you get from all these other practices that you might have been doing for years. But God can appear in human form, according to Prabhat Ranjan Sarkar, P.R. Sarkar. He said Krishna, about 3,500 years ago, was another embodiment of that supreme consciousness. And he hinted that the era that we're in now requires that same expression of supreme consciousness. And you can say he hinted that he was that expression for this particular era.
Okay. Has there been anyone more modern that would have been identified as that supreme consciousness in a human being?
Not between Shiva and the present time. Shiva, Krishna, and if it's the case, Ananda Murti are the 3 expressions in human historical time.
Okay.
And he actually made a prediction, P.R. Sarkar made a prediction that there won't be a 4th on the earth, because human civilization is only going to be on the earth for about 1,500 more years before it's not able to continue to exist on planet Earth. So he said that expression of supreme consciousness has happened 3 times in the history of the earth.
Okay.
Jesus was not considered.
I was just about to ask. Was he considered? He didn't consider Jesus Christ to be one of those people.
He didn't, but Christians do.
Right.
They say he's both God and the Son of God, and there's different qualities. But Ananda Murti considered him I'd say a spiritual teacher.
Okay. And you said Ananda Murti, is that who is that?
That's P.R. Sarkar.
Oh, that's P.R. Sarkar. Okay. So did Sarkar include him? So he included himself with Shiva, Krishna himself, and then that's
He
it?
did.
Okay.
He did indirectly.
Okay. I'm just saying in a bad way. It's just like you include yourself. It's
no.
Okay.
He did indirectly in a number of hints that he gave, but he didn't come out and say publish in the newspapers. I'm the 3rd incarnation of supreme consciousness. That people realized it, one person at a time from his people who contacted him.
And he didn't forecast that I would be the 4th, so there's that too, right? There's no way.
That who would be the 4th?
Not me. I was just kidding.
No,
okay.
but he said that the supreme, the goal of every individual life is to raise their consciousness so that it actually becomes one with that infinite consciousness. There cannot be 2 infinite supreme consciousnesses So when a person gets to that stage, they actually merge with the one supreme consciousness.
Okay, yeah, and
And
you'd
then
mentioned
they,
that that's what eventually the goal is, to merge back in with the
yeah,
infinite consciousness. So that's what
yes.
the whole deal's about. Okay.
That's the highest you can go. But from that, you can also start creating universes yourself, which is what it's been, I guess, doing from time immemorial.
Okay.
And
Well, yeah,
even
let's
beyond time, because the supreme consciousness is beyond time and space. All of those things are creations within its mind.
Okay. Yeah, let's kind of go backwards to that because that's a very, very interesting point. The cosmic mind and how that developed. And you touched on it. If you will, give us a little bit more about that. I know you have the infinite consciousness, and then it gets qualified because it's unqualified. It's just consciousness. Then it gets
Yes.
the next thing is that it does get qualified by its own nature of, and I can't pronounce it right. I'm sorry. What did you, how'd you pronounce it? Um, well, it's qualification. Let's call it that. It gets
Yeah,
qualified.
Shakti is its
Shakti,
power to
yeah.
qualify itself.
Okay.
It qualifies a portion of itself.
Okay.
Okay, so it doesn't qualify all of itself, a portion of itself, and that qualified portion is infinite. And
Okay.
it's derived from infinite supreme consciousness, which still remains infinite, even though a portion of it is qualified. Okay, so
Okay.
but now you've got an infinite qualified supreme consciousness, which the first thing it starts doing is further qualifying itself. And okay, what is this Shakti? It's actually three transformative principles in one. There's a sentient quality, mutative quality, and a static quality, and those are the three creative powers of Shakti. In the initial state, those three qualities or forces are in a balanced state. They exist in the unexpressed supreme consciousness, but they're in a balanced state. So that's why they say it's unexpressed. But those qualities become unbalanced and start creating the universe almost as soon as they become unbalanced, and a flow comes out from the, you can say, the balanced triangle of forces. It becomes unbalanced, and a creative flow starts. First, the sentient flow starts, and a mind begins to start to form, which is the sentient portion of the mind, which is the feeling of I exist. From that sentient portion of the mind, the mutative factor takes over and begins to further qualify that sentient portion. And now you get the mutative portion of the mind, which is the I do. So this is the cosmic mind we're talking about. A feeling of I exist, I do, and then that I do portion of the mind starts qualifying itself with the static factor, and then you can say an I have done portion of the cosmic mind develops. So now you've got an I exist, I do, and I have done. All of those together are the cosmic mind. And within that cosmic mind, then you can start evolving a universe within the cosmic mind itself. The I done portion of the cosmic mind is the part that the universe forms in stages also. The universe evolves in stages, starting with the most subtle matter, which is the etheric or space factor, and then the aerial factor, which is, you can say, gases that are highly spread out in space, and they form stars. So that's the luminous factor. Planets form, and they have a liquid factor in the planets, and then the solid factor in terms of evolution. So you get 5 fundamental physical factors that they're evolved stepwise in the cosmic mind. Okay, until you get down to planets that have a solid surface, and that the process of becoming more and more solidified goes to a stage where it reaches its maximum state of crudification in the solid factor. At that stage, either an explosion can occur, which kind of takes the matter back to its earlier stages, or if that explosion doesn't occur, you can get the situation where life develops in that solid factor. The constant pressure of the solid matter pressing in itself creates internal and external forces within the solid matter, and those internal and external forces express as life. And that's how he says life first evolves from matter. And when life evolves, some of that matter is, he says, like powdered down to its very subtle essence, and a mental stuff forms out of the powdered down matter, and that mental stuff is the beginnings of mind. So when life develops, mind develops also. in a very primitive way, and then it starts expanding with evolution takes over when the initial life and mind start. The most primitive living beings are formed first, and then evolution takes over. But it's all guided by the cosmic mind. This is all part of the plan for the universe to evolve through this stage, and then for life to begin as the cosmic evolutionary cycle starts turning around. You get the first life, and that life starts evolving through plants and animals, human beings, back to the supreme consciousness.
Okay. Well, then going back to the concept of Shakti, the qualifying part of that, the creative qualifying part. And I don't know if you saw one of our episodes was, is God a sculptor? Okay, I did that a while back. And
I didn't watch the episode, but I saw that it existed.
Okay, yeah, and part of that is a really super cool idea that that I think it was Gerald Schroeder had, that he said, what it is there's an infinite God, and that he just he basically, like a sculptor, was chiseling away from the infinite reality in order to create what we have now, as opposed to building something up. He was actually had everything there and chipping away at it, making what we see. Sounds a little bit like what we're talking about here. You have infinite consciousness, and then Shakti kind of revealing a part of that. Right?
Giving itself qualities. So it's not really chipping away. All of the consciousness still is there, but only a portion of that consciousness is, you can say, is colored by the qualities that are provided to it by Shakti. And those colors give qualities that express themselves as mind and different stages of mind. And those further qualifications, and it's Shakti is only doing everything with the permission of, you could say, of Shiva, of the consciousness itself. Shakti does not act alone. Shakti is the power, the creative power of Shiva, and Shakti carries out the wishes of consciousness to create the cosmic mind, to create the physical universe, to crudify by more and more factors of expression until you get down to the solid factor. And then the Shakti, you can say, has run out of its powers. It's crudified as much as it can in the solid nature of matter. And then the cosmic mind starts withdrawing the power of Shakti, and then the matter starts to getting more and more subtle as mind is created, simple mind. That's the withdrawing of the creative powers of Prakriti, so that as the life that develops is more and more subtle, the life in the mind, and then human minds are more subtle still, and they're trying to make their minds more subtle until they can merge with the infinite consciousness.
So, and let's touch on what you already kind of hit a little bit on, which is, basically why would the infinite consciousness want to qualify itself? I get the idea, both in just talking about this with you, but also with others, including Swami, as I mentioned earlier, in the Hindu religion, and others, that this infinite consciousness, the one, or the source, or God, if you will, would be all-knowing, all-powerful, just an all-conscious being. And if that's the case, what is the reason that we can find for having created anything like us or the universe at all? Why would you even do that if you know everything that's going on?
Well, everything that's going on or could go on, but it's all potential. It's all potential. And so to get anything happening, you have to make something, you can say, relatively real. And also, like I said, to not be alone. That infinite consciousness created an infinite number of human souls, which end up embodying themselves in an infinite number of lives, which evolve. And one by one, those infinite souls, merge back into the supreme consciousness. And that whole drama, it's a cosmic drama. And the term is Leela. It's the play of the cosmic, the creator to create universes that have human beings and other life forms that go through the drama of evolution before they realize their true nature and come back to the being supreme consciousness.
Okay.
And that when that happens each time, the individual entity whose consciousness has been limited, it becomes more and more expanded until they realize that limitless consciousness again, and individually they get the bliss, you can say, the infinite bliss that they had before, but that got covered up by the evolutionary process. So we're all potentially that supreme consciousness once we can remove that coverage of qualities that has been given to us by the supreme consciousness itself, just to create a cosmic drama of a universe which has human beings in it. Plants and animals are part of that expression, but all those plants and animals are also evolving. They're all going to be human beings in the future, and those human beings are going to finally merge back into the supreme consciousness. At the stage of human beings, free will exists. So where you go next as a human being depends on the actions that you do as human beings. If they're positive actions, they develop your mind more. Your positive actions not only to develop your own mind, but to help the society and help others develop and take care of living beings in general, plants and animals, because they're also part of the process as well. But if a person is just very selfish and egoistic and they're only trying for their self-benefit and even exploiting others in the process, that will crudify their own mind. It can take them down out of human life. They can become a plant, they can become an animal, they can become a rock or stone again, and then they still have to go up through the evolutionary process. So that's what karma is all about. It's getting the following lives that you have created a need for yourself by changing the quality of your mind. If you no longer rate a human mind because of your actions, you'll get an animal mind or plant mind in the future. But all hope is not lost, because you're always going to have enough time to evolve back into a human mind, and everyone reaches the goal in the end.
Well, let me ask you this, and maybe it's a little bit of a left turn, but it's based on what you just said. Let's say there's a rock, okay?
Yes.
And as opposed to a plant or an animal, it's a rock, and you're saying it can evolve. How does that happen? How can a rock evolve if it doesn't move, or if it doesn't die and then maybe be reincarnated? It just always is a rock.
Well, even rocks will decompose by water. Okay. They can dissolve. They can be incorporated into living beings. Life develops when matter gets, you can say, pulverized in a sense, so that the subtle quality within the matter is released, and that subtle quality is itself a kind of stuff. That stuff is called chitta, but chitta means mind stuff, or it's sometimes called ectoplasm. But it's not about ghosts. It's about the subtle material that evolves when mind is powdered down into its finest stage. And that creates the first individual minds. So that's how matter gets back into the cycle. It gets, sooner or later, it gets powdered down into mind stuff and gets a mind again, and that mind evolves again.
Okay, yeah, let me kind of redirect. Good point. Redirect back into the main conversation here. All of the stuff you've been talking about you said was happening within the mind, within the cosmic mind.
In the cosmic
right?
mind, yes.
Okay, and then from there, all this evolution takes place. The universe gets created. The cosmic evolution takes place, and then there's matter. How does that actually get formed? How does that work?
The matter is formed in the first stage of the evolution of the universe, where those different, the three formative factors, the first one forms the sense of existence of the cosmic mind. That's the sentient force. The sense of doership of the cosmic mind is the mutative force. And then the static force is the stage that forms the I have done portion of the cosmic mind. That creates the matter in the universe. It's created in the done portion of the mind. The mind actually imagines, the cosmic mind imagines the universe, and it forms itself in the cosmic mind, starting from the subtlest matter first, then, like I said, etheric, aerial, luminous, liquid, and solid. All of those are expressions of cosmic mind that are more and more highly qualified by Shakti. So they're all consciousness, expressed in, they say, cruder and cruder forms down to the solid matter, like a rock, which it's still consciousness, but it's now covered up by so many different qualities that you can't experience the consciousness in it. But then when that rock starts getting dissolved in water or starts getting powdered down, the consciousness starts reemerging, first as mind. And one thing that's important about P.R. Sarkar's philosophy, he distinguishes mind and consciousness. This is something that I don't think I've ever really seen in philosophers making a distinction between what is mental and what is conscious. Consciousness is the original pure stuff. Both mind and matter are qualifications of pure consciousness. Mind is subtler than matter, but both are qualifications of consciousness. And when you have a mind, the original consciousness of the cosmic mind has a relationship with each mind in the universe as well. So my mind is being observed by the cosmic consciousness, which has actually created the universe. So the cosmic consciousness knows exactly what's going on, every thought in my mind, because it created me in this whole historical process, which it remembers every stage. It knows every individual. The one result of that is you can't do anything secretly, because the cosmic mind knows everything you're thinking even before you think it. But the positive side is that you're never alone. The cosmic mind is always with you, and it's always ready to support you and help you further evolve. So, but the mind is not the same as the consciousness. Consciousness is the original, you can say, stuff out of which both matter and mind evolves. Mind has the thoughts. The pure consciousness is even beyond thoughts.
Okay. Yeah, I had that in my notes to talk about, like, is there a distinction? It seemed like P.R. Sarkar is distinguishing between mind and consciousness. And let's get back to that in a couple minutes. But I want to cover a little bit more on the matter creation. Is this something that, and the universe gets created and matter gets created based on the cosmic mind thinking it? Or is there some other process?
It's purely the cosmic mind is thinking it.
Okay.
But it's thinking in a very systematic manner, and the word nature is not a force itself. P.R. Sarkar defines nature as the systematic way of acting of the creative power of consciousness. It acts, you could say, in a natural way, a systematic way, to create matter in stages. Mm-hmm. So the Prakriti is acting systematically, and materialistic scientists say, oh, nature did everything. But nature is just the quality of action, the style of action of the creative power of consciousness, which materialistic scientists or people in general aren't aware of that. They just think nature itself is a power, Mother Nature, the force of nature. But nature is just the quality of the creative power of consciousness.
So if we're looking at the modern scientific view, which is there was this period of inflation and the Big Bang, and then the energy gets released and dissipates, all the gases are out there and all the various stuff starts to coalesce through the power of gravity and whatnot, and eventually things become matter and they solidify into matter, et cetera, and then it goes from there. Are you saying, and does P.R. Sarkar say that's how the the cosmic mind is actually thinking all that into action, or is there a difference?
No, it's thinking all that into action, and it thinks it in such a way. P.R. Sarkar didn't use the word Big Bang, but he did use the term explosion, and an explosion from a point. But what's before that point? It's just cosmic mind without no matter, no energy. It all gets burst into existence from some kind of point within the cosmic mind, which is then projecting thoughts that further develop the universe into matter and planets and galaxies and stars. All of that's still thoughts in the cosmic mind. Even when it's what we say physical matter, it's all thoughts in the cosmic mind.
Okay, that's very interesting. Is it fair to say that P.R. Sarkar's ideas then about how the universe and matter gets created is really it's not at odds with modern science. It's just providing the what happened before the Big Bang question, and that is the
Yeah,
cosmic mind existed.
what happened before, and also
And during.
guiding the process itself, because
Right.
it is pre-planned in a sense. One of the big mysteries of biological evolution is how to account for DNA, because DNA is so complex and there's so much of it, even a single cell. And if they try to calculate how could that happen by chance, there's no way. But it's like a matter of faith. They say, oh, if we wait long enough, it'll happen. But if you calculate, many universes lengths would be necessary even to get one little bit of DNA. So, but P.R. Sarkar gave the concept of microvita, okay,
Yeah.
microvita as a subtle living entity which actually forms the particles of matter of the universe. Microvita, he says, billions of microvita are emanated from the cosmic mind. They're more subtle than matter. They compose electrons, protons, and neutrons by the billions. And those microvita can also develop into viruses. Okay, this is a
Yes.
very creative idea. No one has thought of that before, I think, P.R. Sarkar. They can be released from atoms and form viruses, and viruses contain DNA that's already preformed. So, according to P.R. Sarkar, as I understand it, the DNA that are required for the origin of an evolution of life are contained in viruses that were pre-designed into a DNA designed into the microvita that were created by the cosmic mind. So it's not something that happens by chance. You cannot get the DNA of even of an amoeba by chance activities of amino acids bumping into each other randomly. It takes cosmic planning. And so one part of P.R. Sarkar's philosophy is that microvita are integral to the origin and evolution of life by carrying the DNA that life needs to evolve.
Well, in a bit of a challenge to that a little bit is that
Okay.
some of the modern scientists would argue, and I guess how would P.R. Sarkar respond, that it's not pure chance. They're not saying that this all occurred by pure chance, but rather that the constants, the laws of nature, and all of the inner workings of the universe itself are such that matter will eventually arise and life will arise. But it's not random chance. When you take into account all these other factors, these trial and error, but also all of the built-in fundamentals of the universe, that the universe will in fact develop the way it has. How would Sarkar respond to something like that? Like, in other words, you don't need the cosmic mind in order to explain how everything happened.
Well, even many physicists accept that in order to get our universe the way it is, all of the different physical constants of the universe, like the gravitational force, electric charge, different things, have to be a certain number. And if you deviate from that number even slightly, you don't get a viable universe. That's called the fine-tuning of the universe. And materialists say, oh, maybe it's fine-tuning, but there's billions or trillions of universes, each having different physical constants, and maybe one of those is like our universe, and all those other universes had the wrong physical constants. They just never evolved, and therefore it's just a matter of chance that we happen to be lucky to be living in the universe that had all the right finely tuned physical constants for life to evolve. But that's even recognized by physicists, that there's these physical constants have to be just precisely, you can say, fine-tuned in order for our universe to evolve the way it did.
Yeah.
And that's not able to be explained by random action,
Yeah,
except by
it does seem
multiverses that are infinite number of multiverses,
right.
And only one of them has the correct fine-tuning to have life.
It does seem like modern scientists have come up with the multiverse concept in order to address exactly that, the fine-tuning position. And it is a for them, very, use the word vexing problem, because it's like it throws them into a real tizzy. How in the world can we explain the fine tuning unless there's an infinite number of universes? But on this show, we're going to explore the fine tuning argument quite a bit and come up with some ideas that might be a little different. But in the meantime, so I'm taking it that that your position, or PR Sarkar, yours and PR Sarkar's position would be, it isn't, the fine tuning can be easily explained by the fact there was pre-planning in the cosmic mind and infinite
the cosmic
consciousness.
mind pre-planned that fine tuning and just needed to create universes that were all. It doesn't mean it made only one universe, because each portion of the Supreme Consciousness could evolve its own universe in its own section of qualified Supreme Consciousness. It's not limited to a single universe. But our universe would have been projected with a cosmic plan to make it evolve like it did. And pre-planned means pre-knowledge of how it's all going to work out in the cosmic mind.
And again, the cosmic mind, it came from the infinite consciousness being qualified by Shakti. I'm just putting all the spans of the bridge together here. Okay.
Right.
All right, good.
Right.
All right. So, and I definitely want to dive into Microvita, because that is a very cool concept, and just really caught my attention. But before I do that, I want to talk about clash and cohesion, the concept that P.R. Sarkar developed, and give us a little bit about that. How does that fit into the picture here, the terms clash and cohesion, the concepts there?
Okay. Well, I noticed when thinking about it that the term clash and cohesion was used quite a lot by P.R. Sarkar in different discourses, and I looked it up. There's now all his discourses are in a digital encyclopedia. So I searched on clash and cohesion, just the expression, and I found that about 95% of the expressions had to do with the evolutionary process. He was saying evolution occurs when there's clash and cohesion. On the inanimate level, it can produce life and mind, or if it's on the animate level, it's like clash. It means a physical struggle between life forms or struggle for existence. That can evolve life, and when life evolves, mind evolves also. So the term clash basically means an interaction on the physical level or on a psychic level, and cohesion means some constructive result from that clash that occurs. It could be that there's more mental development. It could be more physical development. But P.R. Sarkar clarified that clash and cohesion is actually required for any kind of physical or mental or spiritual progress in the universe. I mean, it's built in that the universe requires clash and cohesion at every level to evolve from the simple basic materials to life, to mind, to higher mind. And what it does, the mechanism of this is that what clash does, it expands the mind that's partly in the nerve cells. If you've got nerve cells, part of the mind is living or exists in the nerve cells. But if you're under pressure, either physical pressure or fighting or struggling or mental clash, you're trying to figure out a solution to a problem, your mind expands. It actually, your brain, your mental matter, your ectoplasm expands, and it puts pressure on your brain cells, and that causes your brain cells to become stronger. It develops your brains, and then your brain itself becomes bigger. Your brain expands, and when your brain expands, you need a more developed body to go along with the expanded mind. And so the body develops not necessarily bigger, but more developed. Elephants have bigger bodies than human beings, but human beings, their bodies, humans have a more developed mind than elephants. Humans control elephants because humans have mental power that they can use. Elephants don't have much mental power, and they can be controlled by higher mental power. So a small man can control a big elephant because the man is smarter than the elephant. Mm-hmm. But P.R. Sarkar's theory is that during evolution, clash and cohesion is the mechanism for the expansion of mind within the brain, which then develops the body. So both the mind and the body develop, and clash and cohesion is the general mechanism by which that happens. Okay. So it's not the same as survival of the fittest in the Darwinian sense, because the Darwinian sense is if you're the fittest, you survive. and therefore the fittest survive, if you think about it, and therefore they're the survivors, they're the fittest because they survive. It's a circular kind of definition of who's the fittest. You watch and see who survives, they're the fittest. So that's really not a scientific definition, but it's accepted by materialists because they don't have any better explanation. P.R. Sarkar's explanation is that physical and mental clash, if people are in a tight situation, they think, how am I going to get out of this situation? That they have to think very hard. Not only human beings, but animals and plants who they have their minds too, and they think how to escape, following their instincts. Human beings use their mental powers, how to escape, or if they're in fighting a war, how to develop stronger weapons, how to develop a bow and arrow, how to develop a wheel. All of these mental inventions, are a result of the expansion of mind when people are struggling to survive, and human beings now are more mental than physical. And so we use our minds to survive, doing jobs that, computer programming, such things. Animals basically use their instincts to survive. Some higher animals have a little bit of developed the mind, but they don't have free will like humans have. So clash and cohesion is the main mechanism of evolution. And basically the rule is the more clash, the more expansion of mind. So I think maybe in the future, people will realize that, and they'll say, okay, we have an equation for how to get expansion of mind, which you can say is intellect. Expansion of intellect, the more mental or physical clash a person experiences, the more their mind develops. And that's a quantitative expression that is, you can say, mathematical, whereas Darwinism doesn't have any mathematical predictions for evolution particularly. They just say, see who survives, and those are the fittest.
Okay.
So it's the survival of the survivors.
Well, interesting. So Sarkar, P.R. Sarkar was not a Darwinian in terms of evolution and biological evolution. That's pretty fair to say, right?
He acknowledges the struggle for existence, but the mechanism of that struggle, expanding the mind, which then develops the body, that's the evolutionary process.
Interesting. All right, so we're coming up to a break, but so I want to kind of, again, I always build bridges. Want to see if I can put this all together. We've got infinite consciousness is the ultimate reality, and out of that has a Shakti qualifies it and creates the cosmic mind. And we have the cosmic mind creating in its mind the universe and matter, universe, energy, all of it through effectively the same modern concept, but it provides an explanation for why or how all this happened. And then you have evolution, cosmic evolution, and in particular biological evolution being controlled or being not controlled but guided by, or the mechanism for it is clash and cohesion. And when we come back, I'm assuming that's kind of correct. Maybe you could correct me or finish that off, if you will, after the break. But also, I want to fit in that really outstanding idea of Microvita. We will be right back with our discussion with Richard Gauthier in just a minute. So excited.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome back to Exus The Podquest, where we're continuing our conversation with Richard Gauthier, and we're talking about P.R. Sarkar's philosophy and all the stuff surrounding that. If you'd like to check out, and you should check out, Richard's website, it is Richard, then I'll spell it, Richard Gauthier, GAUTHIER.academia.edu/research, where there's hundreds of articles on a bunch of subjects, but a lot of it focusing on consciousness and the philosophies of P.R. Sarkar. Welcome back, Richard. We're going to continue our conversation now, if you are up for it and ready to go.
Yes.
All right. Let me slide all the way back to the beginning, because I kind of missed one of I always do this, missed like the biggest question and then have to go back, which I'm doing now. We talked about the nature of the universe, etc., and we've covered the supreme ultimate consciousness, supreme consciousness. And the question is how did that get there? What created that?
Okay, it's supreme, it's uncaused, which means nothing caused it, so it was always there. And therefore, you can say this is postulated as a logical system, you can start with an infinite uncaused supreme consciousness and go on from there. You can't, the question of where did it come from doesn't arise if it's infinite and uncaused.
Okay. All right. So, and I suppose that if I ask the question, well, how did P.R. Sarkar know that that's the case? Then we'd say, well, that was his experience, just like the same kind of path we went down before, right?
Yes, and other people could have that experience through their practice of meditation. Apparently, he had it, from birth.
Okay. Wow. Okay. All right. And then before the break, I kind of built from that supreme consciousness all the way forward my understanding of where all the pieces are, the spans of the bridge, so to speak. Do I have all those parts pretty much in the right order and all that?
An evolution coming from the clash and cohesion, so into more and more developed animals and plants, back to up to human beings, which then develop further and merge with the supreme consciousness in the end.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Now I want to go back and hit the idea of the concept of Microvita. Unpack that for us. Tell us what that's about. That is just a super cool concept.
It's super cool. In 1986 December, P.R. Sarkar, in one of his regular discourses on science, he introduced the topic for the first time. And he started out by saying these microvita are subtle living entities that move throughout the universe. They create minds and bodies, and they also cause diseases. So this was the first time we had heard about Microvita in December 1986. And he gave in the next a few years, he gave about 20 talks about Microvita in quite a lot of detail. So talking about them as if he knew them in detail. And then he left it for people to develop a science of Microvita. He said you'd have to develop your conceptual understanding in order to be able to do research on Microvita, because it's a very subtle topic. So he almost withdrew the topic when he asked a group of his teachers, do you understand Microvita? And they said, no, we don't understand it. And he said, well, maybe I'll withdraw it. I gave the idea 200 years too early. And they said, no, don't withdraw it. We like it.
Yeah.
So it was like that. So he said, okay, but now you have to develop the science of Microvita. I've given you the basics. So what he said is that Microvita create life and minds in the universe. They also compose atoms by the billions. He said a carbon atom is composed of billions of microvita. He said microvita exist in 3 levels of complexity. The simplest are the ones that are visible in a powerful microscope, and those are the ones, he said, they can develop into viruses, but before they develop into viruses, they're point-like. So the microvita that compose atoms are more point-like, but they can develop, when they get out of atoms, they can develop into viruses. Viruses, we know, contain DNA, the chemicals of life, DNA, RNA, some proteins, and maybe that's how the first life may have been created, by the action of microvita turning into viruses in a proper environment that had the right chemicals available, so that the microvita could organize those chemicals to create the first living cells. So that's the simplest kind of microvita of 3 categories. The second kind of microvita, he said, you can't see them in a microscope like an electron microscope, but you know them by their actions, not by their visible qualities. And the third, the most subtle microvita, he said, are actually like he described those subtle microvita as luminous bodies. He said there's in Indian culture, there's a concept of luminous bodies that, some are attracted to music, some are attracted to good qualities, some help people spiritually, some are trying to always earn more money, they're attracted to physical matter. Those luminous bodies, P.R. Sarkar said, are also the most developed kinds of microvita. So a whole range of categories, from the creation of life to the action of microvita in moving through minds as well as bodies. And the subtlest microvita are luminous bodies that are, you can say, he described luminous bodies as human beings that are between one life and another. When a person dies, before they get another body, they can be a luminous body. Okay, a luminous body, instead of containing all 5 physical factors, luminous, aerial, let's say etheric, aerial, luminous, liquid, and solid, a luminous body only contains the first 3 factors, doesn't have a liquid and solid body, and so they can be visible under certain circumstances, but anyway, those luminous bodies have they're human beings that are between lives. And P.R. Sarkar described those as also the subtlest kinds of microvita. So,
Wow.
so it's a big subject.
Yeah, that is a big subject.
Microvita.
Yeah, so where did he come up with this idea? I mean, when he was one day sitting there thinking, well, maybe there's these microvita that how did that even happen?
It came out of the blue, from our point of view. He just one day he has a series of lectures topics called Renaissance Universal, of ideas that are scientific or economic or social, cultural, that will help society evolve. So this was one of the scientific ideas that he gave out of the blue in 1986. Another one he gave is he said that the poles of the Earth are going to start shifting in the relatively near future. And he didn't specify whether it was the geographic or the magnetic poles, but he said they're going to shift in a dramatic way, and that will, be a big problem for human beings, but they will also evolve spiritually as a result of the pole shifts, and the pole shifts like had happened in the past, which had also accelerated the evolution of life. So these were 2 topics that he gave from you can say the platform of Renaissance Universal, which are his social, economic, and cultural ideas.
Do we know where he says that the microvita came from? Like, is this just a creation from the cosmic mind?
Yeah, he called it the cosmic factor in that particular talk, but another place he said it's the cosmic mind.
Okay.
So the cosmic mind pre-planned the existence of microvita. Actually, he gave a talk about cosmology. He said in the future, cosmology, the 2 ingredients of the universe will be energy and microvita. Okay, not matter and energy, but energy and microvita, because microvita compose the matter. Microvita, enough of them, combine with energy, and the microvita contain all the information to create different kinds of physical particles, electrons, protons, neutrons. So the fundamental particles of existence are microvita and energy.
Okay, because
matter is not primary. Materialists are going to have to say goodbye to matter because that's not the primary entity.
Well, I think some materialists might say that matter is not primary because but they would point back to a scientific point, which is of course that matter is the equivalent of energy. It's a form of energy, but just under E equals mc squared, it becomes it becomes matter instead of pure energy. But I want to kind of jump back real quickly. Do we know if P.R. Sarkar was either influenced by, or do we know if he even really was familiar with the work of Wilhelm Leibniz, who kind of had this idea of monadology, kind of a weird name, but similar in a way to what Sarkar's saying?
He didn't mention Leibniz. He actually mentioned relatively few people in his talk, so he didn't go in detail talking about other philosophers. And so he didn't mention monads. Monads are a concept of sort of individual, self-contained entities that are somehow fundamental, but they don't communicate with each other. Each one is kind of a world in itself. Mm-hmm. So I don't think his idea of monads went very far, but he was trying to think what are the ultimate entities of existence.
Yeah, I think you're right. I don't think that the monad concept really had a lot of traction, and really the whole area of this subject matter doesn't seem to have as great traction as maybe it should. Certainly there's, and we'll touch on panpsychism in just a little bit because this seems to be somewhat related. But and it's another show that we did that I wanted to ask you about. I don't know if you saw this one. It was with Dr. Ian Walters. and he has a concept well, it's not even a concept. What he does is a conjecture. But it's based on math that he did, which is way beyond my ability. But he has a certain mathematical scheme that is proposing, conjecturing that there are things known as life particles that arise out of a life field and that are basically responsible for the evolution of the universe. Sounds rather similar to the concept that you're talking about here with Pierre Sarkar's Microvita.
I watched his interview. He said that life was the fundamental thing out of which everything else evolved. So I think Pierre Sarkar would take issue with that the supreme consciousness was first evolving the cosmic mind, and then life evolving within the cosmic mind. So life itself, it's important, but it's not the primary aspect. And so it was a conjecture. Microvita, you can say, is also a conjecture, so we can just see how those different ideas develop. I spent a lot of time trying to get a mathematical model of microvita forming like electrons and photons of light over the years. Off and on, for about 20 years, I was trying to get different models of how an electron could be composed of microvita. I gave talks at physics conferences, but I couldn't get any traction out of it. People would always say, what's the proof of microvita? And I couldn't give them a proof. Later on, I proposed an experiment that would test for the existence of microvita. If you assume their properties are that they develop into viruses, you could have an experiment that had a radioactive material, which is presumably releasing microvita. Okay, that was a postulate. And those microvita could go into a container that contained some different chemicals that could, by themselves, they wouldn't form into life, but if microvita got into those chemicals, that could organize those chemicals to form bacteria, for example. So the experiment to test for microvita would be to put a radioactive material outside of a test tube of chemicals and see if life develops in that test tube. In the absence of the radioactive material, maybe no life would develop, but in the presence of an external radioactive material, life would develop in the test tube. That would be a pretty strong evidence for something in the radioactive material created life in the test tube. And right now, there's no theory of how radioactivity can create life, so it would have to be pointed to something within the radioactive material, which could be microvita.
Yeah.
So that was but finding people, because I couldn't do the experiment myself. I'm not a microbiologist, and it also requires money, time, security to work with radioactive materials. So that experiment is still on the theoretical level. It is a proposal to test for the existence of microvita with the qualities that Pierre Sarkar mentioned.
Yeah, I read that in one of your articles, and it is fascinating about the how the possibility of experimental evidence and experiments to try and find microvita. I know also Dr. Walters said the same thing, which is it's his ideas are waiting for experiments to somehow validate that, and based on the math and validate that these are actually true. Until then, it remains a conjecture. But if you look at it, and I've said this to other people when I'm talking to them in general about it, is that if there's a lot of things like that we've had. For instance, my favorite example is the Higgs boson, right? Peter Higgs came up with the idea of the Higgs field and the Higgs boson back in the 1960s, and it took all the way up until the Large Hadron Collider, not
yes.
the collector, but the collider. Very recently found that actually exists. So you never know, and hopefully experiments will bear out the ideas of Dr. Walters and maybe Pierre Sarkar with microvita.
Yeah. I think that's what Pierre Sarkar wanted. He gave the idea, and he said, now people should start researching on these microvita without further delay.
Yeah.
That was in the first talk that he gave. So he said it's urgent. He said then many problems of human society can be solved in a nice way if the theory of microvita is developed. But it requires people with highly conceptually developed minds, he said. And that also means people should be practicing meditation to help conceptually develop their minds. So probably it will be developed by spiritually minded people in the future.
Yeah. Well, in preparing for today's interview, it kind of occurred to me that maybe a draw, maybe something would be able to push the idea forward if you marry the concept of microvita, not marry it, that's a bad term, but you use the idea of microvita and you kind of blend it together with the idea of string theory. Because in string theory, all of the various elementary particles are made up of vibrating string, millions and whatever numbers of vibrating strings. It seems there's a connection between the two, but of course, string theory doesn't say that the microvita are a living, string theory doesn't say the strings are living entities, whereas microvita does say that these are living entities, right?
Yeah. Well, there could be a connection. String theory is still just a theory. There's no experiments even proposed that could test string theory.
Right.
And so, and many people are investigating, thousands of people, write papers about string theory. I think maybe 3 or 4 people are writing about microvita.
Yeah.
So, but they could be brought together.
Yeah, it seems like there's at least a little bit of a possible connection there, and if so, maybe a bridge could be built. We'll see.
Yes, let's see.
Yeah, I want to kind of turn to the really one of the most mysterious subjects in the universe, and let's see where this fits in our discussion. Because I'm a guy I always want to have the bridge from A to Z and make sure all the pieces are there. So this seems to come maybe a little not connected to the rest, but let's try it and we'll see if we can fit it in. I want to talk about the hard problem of consciousness. And the hard problem, we had our opening quote of the day was from David Chalmers, who also kind of coined this phrase, the hard problem of consciousness. And so, if you will, give us a description of what that is, and then let us know, what did P.R. Sarkar have to say about it?
Okay. The reason it's called the hard problem of consciousness, because the hard problem means you've got a physical brain that's basically, electrons and protons and neutrons, and somehow, because materialism has become sort of the dominant theme in science and philosophy these days, you still have to account for subjective experience. People have minds and they experience colors, they experience thoughts, they experience many things in their minds, which we say that's conscious experience, which you can't explain away. It's just direct. Everyone knows they have conscious experiences because pain, you can't just say, I'm not feeling but that my finger is being cut off. It's a real pain. So how does conscious experience come from physical matter? And that's called the hard problem. And the reason it's hard, because it's actually almost impossible. Physical matter is insentient. So how do you get qualities coming out of physical matter? And so that's been a problem. The mind-body problem that Descartes proposed. He said that there's a mind is one kind of substance and matter is another kind of substance, and they're very different, but no one could ever figure out how they communicated with each other. And so that dualism concept was basically sort of rejected by most philosophers, because they said the mind, if it can't communicate with the body, then what good is those two different entities? They're running parallel to each other. Our experience is that I think I'm going to raise my hand, and I raise my hand. So mind has a thought, and my body follows. But the question is how to explain that scientifically. And there's no explanation that people ever could find at how a mind could communicate with the body. And so that led a lot of philosophers to just think, okay, let's get rid of the idea of, in terms of substances, let's say that the mind is really just what the brain is doing. Okay, then there's no dualism anymore, that the actions of the brain are just what give the experience of consciousness. And that became sort of the philosophy of many scientists and philosophers, that just the action of the brain itself is the consciousness, or is the mental quality. But that's very counterintuitive, because we feel like we have the experience of, we don't know what our brain is doing. You wouldn't even know that you had a brain if you hadn't studied in biology class. We've got our consciousness, but it's true that when you stimulate the brain in different ways, it affects your consciousness. And if you damage the brain, you damage certain parts of your ability to do things. There is a close connection between the mind and the brain, but no one knows what it is. Okay, that's the hard problem. Now, the origin of the hard problem historically is to make a mathematical science that would describe physics. But if you look at the world, there's colors and there's sounds, there's smells, and he couldn't describe any of that by mathematics. So let's ignore the qualities of experience. Let's just remove them from our idea of the physical world. And then what's left is just shapes, sizes, motion, and position. Things that can be measured mathematically. And based on those sort of four quantitatively measured things, physical science developed very well. You developed gravity, you developed, quantum mechanics. All of those things developed without ever talking about why is red as what it is, why is a smell what it is. So we've got a great science, but the colors and forms and qualities have been left out of the science of our reality. It's not in the mathematical science that's formed today. But the result is that once you take the qualities out of the physical world, you have to say, well, where did they come from? Because we've got the experience of red, we got the experience of pain. So the answer is that it's got to come from the brain, because the brain is all what's left when you say that the colors don't exist in the world, outside. So what P.R. Sarkar did, he said that with the cosmic mind is creating the world in its mind. And he said all of those worlds that are created from different mental vibrations. And all of those vibrations, this is part of P.R. Sarkar's philosophy, have vibrations that correspond to sensory qualities. Every vibration in the cosmic mind has either a sound or a form, a color, either a taste or smell. All of those qualities are in the vibrations of the universe itself, and the cosmic mind can experience those vibrations as qualities. The cosmic mind hears the cosmic sound of the universe, which is called Om. That's the sound of all the sounds of the universe at once. Okay, and so the cosmic mind can hear the sounds or see the colors. So all of those things are in the universe. So if you allow that those what seem to be mental qualities, put them back into the universe, then it's much easier to explain how the sensory system can produce experiences of color in our mind, for example. First, you have to accept the concept of mind as different from the body. Okay, philosophers, many said, oh no, let's push the mind into the brain, so then we won't have two problems. But P.R. Sarkar said, no, let's keep the mind. The mind is associated with the brain. All these different vibrations in the world have colors and smells and tastes associated with them. Our eye is an organ of the body. It's called a sensory organ. Those vibrations, which according to P.R. Sarkar, are carrying the different sensory vibrations of color and form and smell and taste, those go into the different organs of our body. What are those organs? They're the parts of our body that makes contact with the sensory qualities of the external world. So our eye, picks up vibrations coming from the colored and the colored qualities, vibrations of the universe. They go into the eye, carried by photons. But he also says there's particular subtle vibrations that are associated with light, he calls them tanmatras. Tanmatras are subtle essences, or he calls them inferential waves. They're the waves that carry the vibrations of form, of color, taste, and smell. They move with the physical waves like a photon. So when light goes into your eye, those tanmatras carrying the color of red, for example, go into your eye. They hit the back of your eye, the retina, but the photon stops at the retina. Light is absorbed in your retina, but those vibrations of color and form that got into your eye, he says those vibrations get picked up by other subtle waves and go on into the brain, okay, carried by the optic nerves. The vibrations of color, if you're holding a flower in your hand, so the red color went into your eyes, the vibrations of the color red go to the back of your eye, and they keep going into the optic nerves of your brain, and they reach a point in your brain which he called the appropriative point. Sarkar gave the name appropriative point, where the vibrations of conscious experience that came in from the physical world make contact with your brain, with your mind. The mind is in contact with your brain at certain particular points in the head. Those qualities, like red vibration, therefore, they go from the optic nerves, they go into the mind, and in the mind, there's also, just like the cosmic mind has the I exist, I do, and I have done, the individual mind also has three levels of I exist. You have a feeling of your existence. I do, your feeling of doing or thinking, and I have done is the third level of your individual mind, and that individual mind, the third level, that takes forms, is vibrated by the colors and forms that come into your mind. That third level of your mind takes the form in your mind of, let's say, a rose. You're looking at a rose, the vibrations of the rose went into your mind and vibrated, your optic nerves vibrated your mind. The vibrations of those colors in your mind produced an image of a rose in your mind, a red rose. There's a red physical rose out there, and there's a red rose in your mind, and the I do portion of your mind sees the red image that's in the I have done portion of your mind. So your mind is getting a recreated image of the world out there. So according to that view, if the colors are out in the world, and which Kepler took them away, he said, let's remove those colors from the world and concentrate on mathematically describable things. If you put those colors back into the world, then it's easy to explain how images of color like red get into your mind, because they're coming in from colored vibrations that are all over the physical world. So that solves the hard problem of consciousness, because those vibrations don't have to come from the physical brain itself. The physical brain is just a way, it's an elaborate sensory and motor organ. The sensory information goes into your brain, gets processed, but finally gets up to a point that it contacts the mind, and the mind is where objects are seen. The mind sees things. The brain doesn't see things. The mind also thinks. The brain doesn't think. What does the brain do? It's basically a sensory organ on one side, or it's also leads to the motor organs on the other side. It receives signals, processes them, thinks about them, and sends out orders to your motor organs to do that. It also can store information. Memories can be stored in the brain as well. So sensing, memorizing, and acting are basically the three functions of the physical brain. All of the thinking and feeling and planning and analyzing and all of these things are going on in the mind, which is not the same as the brain. Yeah. So P.R. Sarkar, in this way, has given a solution to the hard problem by what I say, dissolving the problem. Right. The vibrations are not coming from the physical brain, they're coming from the world outside, which are colored and formed by the cosmic mind. And we see them with our individual minds. That's how we see the sensory world. And we sense other thoughts because they're already going on in our mind. We're not feeling thoughts that are coming from our brain. We're feeling the thoughts because they're going on in our mind. That's why we're experiencing them. The brain is calculating, the brain is doing a lot, but the thinking and experiencing is going on in the mind.
Well, I mean,
it's too long an explanation, but I hope that's helpful.
It's a really, really interesting concept. And when you look at the hard problem of consciousness, I'm certain no one's. I've certainly never experienced anyone or encountered anyone having come up with something like this, putting the the red back into nature, if you will, or into the objective world. But it raises a couple of really interesting thoughts, and we are going to run out of a little time. But I do want to cover a couple things. First off,
one more point
Sure,
is
sure.
that
Sorry.
panpsychism also
Yeah.
proposes that the colors be put back into the world, so that consciousness can also be considered to be fundamental to matter. It kind of puts consciousness back into matter, and says that those colors are also in the world. But panpsychism is a bit different from that all is consciousness as the primary.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned it, because I did mention earlier that I wanted to touch on panpsychism, and maybe that's going to get kind of pushed to another time. But that's a great point. But it's still another similarity a little bit to string theory, because in string theory you've got the way the strings are vibrating gives rise to the nature of the thing, the proton or the neutron or the electron, whatever it is. So the way that it vibrates is doing the manifesting. Here, something similar, where the vibrations are the things carrying the qualities, or what they call qualia, right? So it seems another little bit of an alignment there.
Yeah, I would say the string theory is the vibrating, that's the physical part, but you still have to attach the qualities to the string theory.
Right, and that throws me now into like almost the opposite view, which is we interviewed Larry Gottlieb a while back, and Larry kind of comes from a little bit of a biocosmic kind of biocentrism, I should say, kind of a perspective, and says that they're really, until it's observed, until there's a conscious observer, there's no actual reality out there. And I hope I'm not completely mischaracterizing what he's saying, but I think that's kind of it. He and I got into a conversation involved a Turkey Rubin, of course, and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, that's almost like it's very fashionable in a way these days to build off of quantum mechanics and the observer effect and the dual slit experiment and all of that, and say, well, now you need an observer in order to actually create reality. P.R. Sarkar is saying almost the exact opposite, it seems. Is saying that the reality, the nature, the universe outside of human beings has all these qualities to it, and human beings are here and they're absorbing that and then creating simulations in their brains and minds.
Yeah, I think quantum mechanics must have something to do with consciousness, but it hasn't really been figured out. Mm-hmm. Roger
Penrose
has struggled with that. He's got his own theory that gravity also creates consciousness in the mind, and microtubules in the cells are involved in that, but it's still a theory. But P.R. Sarkar doesn't talk about quantum mechanics particularly. Okay. So it may not play the same role, the vital role that some people think that it does. But the cosmic mind is always seeing the tree fall in the forest, even if individuals are not there to see or hear it fall. So the cosmic mind, so the reality is there even when there's no person to see it, according to P.R. Sarkar.
Yeah. Yeah, that was one of the questions I asked Larry, is if basically the old question, if a tree falls in the forest, and no one's there, does it still make a sound? Of course, and I believe his answer would be no. It wouldn't. It would emanate, maybe there'd be signals and whatever, but it wouldn't be the same thing. You're saying
that's the modern scientific view. It doesn't have any qualities in the physical world.
Yeah, Sarkar saying exactly the opposite.
That's got to be wrong.
Okay.
Because that leads to the hard problem of consciousness, and then you're stuck.
Yeah.
By not being able to explain qualities coming from the brain.
Well, it's just, again, unfortunately, we're going to run up against a clock. But so I'd like to do, again, let's go from the beginning, see if I can put all the pieces together, and if I've got it, okay? You got the infinite supreme consciousness that was uncaused, and it started, it didn't even start, it just was always there, all right? And from there, it, through Shakti, created it qualified itself, a part of itself, not all of itself, but a part of it. And from there, it then developed the cosmic mind, which in the cosmic mind you have the development of the universe being created possibly through the mechanics of the Big Bang and inflation and all of that, but nevertheless the cosmic mind was the source of that. And then you have the universe created, evolution takes place, clash and cohesion are the driving force of evolution, with Microvita throughout the entire universe, which are living entities that give rise to life and all kind of a cosmic panpsychism in a sense, but maybe more of a life panpsychism. And then fitting into that, and this is a little bit of a hard fit, but still you got things become conscious. And through, and he's saying through his concept and his solution to the hard problem of consciousness, which involves the 10 matras, and to bring qualities into the brain and going from there.
The mind develops in evolution, and the mind, it starts out being very, very primitive. It doesn't have the thought qualities that humans have, but every mind is reflecting cosmic consciousness to a certain extent, depending how developed that mind is. So what we talk about, our conscious experience, when I feel like I'm conscious, I'm having thoughts in my mind, but my feeling of consciousness is coming from the fact that I'm actually being observed and showered on by the cosmic consciousness that is reflecting off of my mind, okay, to the extent that my mind is developed enough to develop a good reflection of that consciousness. So our experience of consciousness is due to the fact that our minds are like mirrors to reflect the consciousness, which is the infinite consciousness.
Yeah.
And that gives us a feeling of conscious awareness. Otherwise, our minds, we could have a zombie who is having all kinds of mental thoughts, but there's nothing conscious going on. So without that infinite consciousness reflecting on our individual minds, we would not be conscious.
Okay.
We would just be like automatons.
Wow.
The consciousness that reflects on each mind, no matter how developed or undeveloped it is, that gives that quality of consciousness to that mind.
Okay. Well, we had great clarification to that and a good fine point to it. I like that a lot. And of course, you also had mentioned that there's the cosmic mind always with us and looking and knowing what we're thinking, et cetera, which has a significant disadvantage for me in many instances.
Disadvantage and advantage also.
And advantages,
hopefully the
I suppose,
advantage
too.
outweighs the disadvantage.
Yeah. I guess we'll see where the balance is on that. But nevertheless, but okay. Thank you so much for being with us here today, Richard. It was a fabulous conversation. I learned so much through this process. And that is, of course, the main purpose of the show, is to gain knowledge and to impart it to our audience. So again, I'm going to give your website out again. It is richardgauthier.academia.edu/research. Lots of articles there. You got to go check that out. There's just so much to read through. Won't summarize it again, but we already been through it. But go there and do that. And then go over to our website, of course, and check us out here. Give us your comments on this episode and all the other episodes. Again, I want to thank Richard Gauthier for being our guest here today. But yeah, check out the website. Of course, come back to YouTube. That's vital to do so that you can, do what you do. Like this episode, even if you don't. Also, subscribe, even if you already have, and keep subscribing and get your 10. That is, of course, as you know, a requirement. Go out and get 10 other people to be subscribers on the show every month. It's not that big of a deal, especially if you start out early. You guys go all of those places. You go there. We will be going ever forward.